Hello, dear viewers. What happened at the meeting of Western leaders in the White House?
Last night, while it was night in America and day here, the White House witnessed one of its busiest diplomatic days in at least recent years. And as Mr. Donald Trump put it, since 2017, there hasn't been such a heavy diplomatic hosting and significant diplomatic gathering at the White House. And this meeting was very important, especially after the one in Alaska regarding the fate of war or peace in Ukraine between Trump and Putin, which led to increased ambiguities about Ukraine's future. This caused concern among European countries and all European powers about Ukraine's fate and their own position. And even Mr. Zelensky himself did not fully accept what Putin had proposed, and a deadlock was on the verge of being resolved. This prompted all the leaders to first stand by Mr. Zelensky, accompany him to the White House, and support him in this very intense meeting. Present were Mr. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, President Macron of France, and many other diplomatic officials who were seated around them. They gathered at the invitation of Mr. Trump and held very important discussions regarding peace or war in Ukraine. The most significant part of their talks focused on distinguishing between an immediate ceasefire and a lasting peace in Ukraine. And it is clear that Mr. Putin, in seeking an end to the war in Ukraine, is after a lasting peace that takes into account Russia's own interests. The next point of discussion is the division between East and West. Western countries and powers are concerned about this. That parts of Ukrainian territory, including Kherson, Zaporizhia, or Donbass, might be handed over to Russia. This would lead Russia not to be satisfied and later seek to take over all of Ukraine, and after that, pursue acquiring other European countries as well. And on the other hand, Russia believes that if it does not keep Crimea permanently and does not retake regions like Donetsk from Ukraine, it will lose out. This would cause Ukraine and Europe to try to take other parts of Russia in the future. That's why this is a historic war that is very important. And as Mr. Trump said, he thought it would be easy, but it wasn't easy. It was difficult, but not impossible. In any case, it was a very important meeting, and serious decisions were made regarding the future of Ukraine.
Thank you, Zalil. What was the outcome of this meeting? Will Donald Trump's efforts to end the Ukraine war bear fruit?
Donald Trump, who claims to have ended 6 wars, and although he himself doesn't count the Iran and Israel war, otherwise it would be 7 for him, believes that this is his 7th major war that he is in the process of ending. And of course, the dream of winning the Nobel Peace Prize is also on Mr. Trump's mind. But as for how successful his efforts have been, that's a question whose answer will become clear later. For now, all that can be said is that the outcome of this meeting was a few things. One of them was that if Ukraine's NATO membership is to be cancelled, or if Ukraine is not to become a NATO member, then in return, Ukraine must be given lasting security guarantees. And along with that, it was said that Ukraine's military must be strengthened. And another solution that was considered for security guarantees, Sadat, was that they said the United States should sell $100 billion worth of weapons to NATO. That is, NATO, meaning the European countries, would pay for it, and then these weapons would be provided to the Ukrainian military. Another topic was that about 1,000 prisoners from both sides should be released, especially Ukrainian children for whom the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, has taken responsibility to make efforts in this regard. She also sent a letter to Mr. Putin through Donald Trump. And alongside others like Ms. von der Leyen and others, they emphasized, including Merz, whose remarks were controversial, that there must be an immediate ceasefire. But they said no, the fate should be decided only after a bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and then a trilateral meeting with Trump present. And in addition, another important decision that was made was that Ukraine should, regarding the territories it is supposed to exchange with Russia, decide again in the future based on what is stipulated in the constitution and the previous referendum in Ukraine, which will be held again later. And these were the so-called significant outcomes that emerged from this meeting. However, all the European leaders were optimistic after this meeting and expressed satisfaction with Mr. Trump's efforts, expressing hope that if Russia truly wants to end the war, it should be willing to participate in a bilateral and then a trilateral meeting at least within the next 2 weeks.
So, what were the most important discussions that took place at this high-level diplomatic meeting?
One of the most important points raised was that the war in Ukraine must definitely come to an end, not just a temporary ceasefire, not just a truce, but a lasting peace. There should be no more wars between Russia and Ukraine over territory in the coming years. Another key point was that Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky stated that if the war ends and agreements are reached, he is willing to hold elections. And well, one of the reasons for this could be that in behind-the-scenes meetings, it might have been suggested that if Russia also wants a change in Ukraine's leadership structure, these elections could serve as a pretext to sideline Mr. Zelensky. There is also the possibility that if this war ends and Ukraine's interests are taken into account, along with Europe's security, then Mr. Zelensky might once again succeed in winning the elections and become Ukraine's next president. Another important point discussed here was that whether or not a ceasefire happens, prisoners must be exchanged. Children should be transferred, released, and of course the flames of war should be extinguished. Well, these were some of the most prominent points discussed. And another important point was that not only Ukraine, but all of Europe should be considered in this matter. Of course, Article 5 of the NATO Treaty states that if one member is attacked, it is considered as if several or all members have been attacked, and this will lead everyone to stand together. With a slight difference in the security guarantees, which has been highly emphasized, here the security guarantee is for Ukraine, so that the broader interests of Europe are taken into account. These were the most important points.
Thank you very much, and now let's turn to Russia. Has Russia reacted, and how much does this path benefit or harm Moscow?
So far, it seems to have gone entirely in Moscow's favor. One of the reasons that pushed and motivated the European powers to stand by Mr. Zelensky and come to the White House so that Zelensky wouldn't lose as well was precisely that everyone was worried it was Mr. Putin who had orchestrated the meeting in El Askar. It was Mr. Putin who wanted to improve his relationship with the West. He wanted the West not to impose any more sanctions on Russia, and he sought a meeting with Trump and all of these things. And even that the issue of Crimea would be settled once and for all as always being Russian territory, and that the matter of territorial exchange would become one of the prominent topics for discussion in future meetings. All of these were Russia's demands. Therefore, most analysts believe that up to this very moment, developments have revolved around and advanced according to Russia's interests and demands. So far, Moscow has acted indifferent and has not reacted. But based on diplomatic principles, it is obliged to respond, so we will probably hear new updates from Russia in the coming hours.
Thank you very much.